Arthur Schopenhauer, the Wolverine of German philosophy, the undisputed champion of philosophical masturbation and pessimism. Schopenhauer was born in 1788 in Danzig city in Poland. In his famous work, The World as Will and Representation, Schopenhauer discusses the will to live as being an irrational, blind, incessant impulse without knowledge that drives instinctive behaviors, causing an endless, insatiable striving in human existence in which nature could not exist without. Doesn't this remind us of the coke junkie Sigmund Freud and his pleasure principle?
Rhetorical question.
Schopenhauer argues that the world we experience around us exists merely as representation, dependent on the cognizing subject's will to live, not as a world that can be considered to exist in itself independently. Schopenhauer identifies the thing in itself, the inner essence of everything, as will. The world as representation is, therefore, the objectification of the will. In other words, our knowledge of objects and the world is thus knowledge of mere phenomena rather than things in themselves. Based on this, Schopenhauer concludes that to convince a man, we must appeal to his self-interest, his desires, his will. It is as if he's saying that you must appeal to the way a man views the world in order to convince him. Schopenhauer considers that aesthetic experiences like producing or perceiving art releases a person briefly from his endless servitude to the will, which is the root of suffering. Aesthetic perception thus transforms an individually oriented state of consciousness to a universally oriented state of consciousness, since art is universal. This universally oriented state of consciousness is what Schopenhauer calls a pure, will-less, painless, and timeless subject of knowledge. Schopenhauer believes that the true salvation from our miserable existence can only result from the total ascetic negation of the will to life. The state of composure in which this negation ends is a state of willlessness or the absence of will. The will is characterized as including episodes of desiring and striving towards ends, and affective states that result from the attainment or non-attainment of ends. In willlessness, all such states are conceived as absent from a subject's consciousness. Cognition occurs, but known appearances no longer act as motives for willing. The negation of the will, in other words, stems from the insight that reveals individuality to be merely an illusion, and that the world in itself, free from the forms of space and time, is one. Ascetic practices, Schopenhauer remarks, are used to aid the will's self-abolition, which brings about a blissful, redemptive, will-less state of emptiness that is free from striving or suffering.